What brought us to Gaza, we knew that the acute trauma that we took care of last year would turn into chronic injuries that needed reconstruction. And that's why we're back this time. Empirically, what brought us here in the first place, and that reasoning still continues, is that we're both embarrassed at what our American government is doing. Um, if it wasn't for the irresponsible nature of our past two presidents and our legislature, um, tens of thousands of children, I'm not talking about the adults now, just the children would be alive. And there are certainly tens of thousands more that are buried under rubble that will never be found. And that's our tax dollars. That's our American bombs that we've donated to an irresponsible fascist government, the Israeli government, that caused this horrible carnage that we're seeing. And of course, you know that the bombing started again last night.
What are you seeing right now? I mean, there's been a resumption of bombings. So how did you experience the resumption of bombings? Like, what did you observe, and how did it affect patients?
So Mark and I are at different hospitals. I'm at Nasser Medical Complex, which is, I think it's the second biggest hospital in Gaza after Shifa, but Shifa doesn't really exist anymore. So Nasser is seeing all of the trauma from basically almost all of Rafah and almost all of Khan Yunis, including the entire Mawasi area south of Deir al-Balah. Last night was the standard mass casualty event that I remember from European hospital, except for that we could actually get a little bit of stuff done. We could actually help many more people because it was much, much better organized this time. And that's really, that is 100% entirely due to the Palestinians, especially one surgeon in particular who's well known here, Khalid al-Ser, just taking it upon himself to make the institution capable of handling mass casualty events. Now, it can't go on forever, you know. If we have two or three of these, I'm sure the stocks of everything in the hospital will be depleted. And certainly we won't have any critical care resources or surgical resources left. But Khalid stood outside the hospital all night and directed traffic, which seems like this, any security guard can do that. That is by far the hardest job in a mass casualty situation. It's usually up to like the chair of a department or something like that. Khalid's 33 years old. But in terms of the casualties we saw, this is the same thing as before. Kids ripped to shreds. So I'm a trauma surgeon. My job is basically to stop people from bleeding to deaths and to stop them from dying immediately from trauma-related causes. So I went to what's called the red area, where people are at immediate risk of death. And the first thing I did was find probably like a 3-something-year-old girl who had a brain injury. She had a wound here. She had wounds all over her face. She had agonal breathing and her pulse was thready. And I had to just the first thing I had to do was tell her daddy she's going to die. There's nothing I can do about it, and move on. The next kid I saw was probably about the same age, 3 or 4. Sorry. Yeah, I know sometimes these things are not easy to hear. I apologize.
No, don't apologize. I mean, it's just horrific.
Yeah. No, it's not pleasant. That's for sure.
But people need to know this, especially because as you pointed out, our government is facilitating.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and like Mark said, none of this the Israelis aren't doing any of this. We're doing this, and I assume you're American too. But we're doing this. The Israelis can do whatever they want. We're the ones facilitating it, so it's on us. I hate it when people say we're complicit. Let's say like we're complicit in Israel's crimes. No. We're committing the crimes together. That's the problem.
So, Feroze, while we wait for Feroze to rejoin, can you talk about what you've been observing?
Last night, there was no less than 65 or 70 horribly injured people in that trauma bay at all times. There's expansive tents here, a 2,000-pound bomb, and the shrapnel from that bomb can travel great through many people before it stops. And the amount of carnage that just a single bomb produces is impressive. We've heard a dozen bombs go off in the area. We actually heard them coming in before they exploded. We heard the jets overhead. We heard the drones before then to assist in their targeting. The casualty events that we saw were, as Feroze had said, mostly children. Most of them are refugees. They're from the north, which was thoroughly destroyed. The north had most of the population at Gaza City, over 1 million people. Many of them have been displaced to this area. This hospital is very small. It only has 2 operating rooms. And so we were operating in labor and delivery units last night. And we had extremely substantial injuries. The amount of carnage that we saw in this very small hospital last night would have paralyzed any teaching institution's trauma bay for an entire day. I'm close to UNC Chapel Hill and Duke, and neither one of those institutions could have effectively dealt with what this little hospital saw just last night. Obviously, they would have dealt with it, but it would have overwhelmed that facility. Just to give some scale to your viewership of what we mean when Feroze says mass casualty event, we mean dozens and dozens of people coming in, every single one of which requires personal, intimate, immediate attention. Um, and you often have to step over people who you think have less of a chance of living so that you can deal with people who will live.
How much of an actual ceasefire was there up until last night?
Oh no! Of course there was, and I operated on 2 days ago of 5-year-old boy who received shrapnel in his forearm and lacerated the most critical nerve in your hand, and I had to take with Feroze's assistance a nerve out of the back of his leg and and use 5 segments of that nerve to graft the nerve because a large piece of shrapnel destroyed the main nerve in his hand that controls function. And there's probably 6 to 10 people a day who died before the bombings of last night. There's sniper rifles. There's a purported buffer zone that's doubles the size from where it used to be. And there's arbitrary shootings from the wall or from the buffer zone. Indeed, one of the premier medical students in Gaza, who's been hanging out with us last year and this year, um, was evacuated from her house, which is at the border of the buffer zone, because they're doubling its size. A house that her family's lived in for 100 years. And they've been evacuated and now live outside of European Hospital, which was a tent neighborhood, which was thoroughly bombed last night. But that's the only safe place that they could evacuate to. So there never was a ceasefire. Israel has never honored a ceasefire in its entire history. They've always negotiated in stages pursuant to the surrender of some hostages, and whenever a sufficient number, but not necessarily all of the hostages, have been recovered, the ceasefire is broken by Israel at all times. This was predictable. Um, Perhaps Feroze can lend more historical perspective on that.
No, you're 100% right. That not only was it predictable, it was literally announced repeatedly. When Smotrich removed his people from the coalition, he literally announced that, oh, don't worry, Netanyahu promised me that in late February the war is going to restart and then we'll rejoin the coalition. So it's no big deal. And Netanyahu made similar statements constantly. So in terms of the ceasefire, the first person that I took care of here with a gunshot wound was, at least I think he was the first person, it's hard to remember now, was a probably 20-year-old guy shot in the left chest in Rafah. The Israelis have constructed this enormous sniper tower in the Philadelphia corridor on the border with Egypt. And the Palestinians believe, again, how they could know this, I have no clue, but they believe that it's actually a fully automated gun system. I don't really know what the right term is, but like kind of a fully automated sniper system that just shoots on based on AI and other such things. And given what we know about the experimental nature of this war, it's entirely possible. But nevertheless, there is a very large, a very tall sniper tower that can fire up to a kilometer, at least a kilometer away, I should say. I had coffee with a cardiologist here who lives in Rafah. This is kind of a wild story. He has, I think he said 4 kids. The youngest is a 4-year-old girl. So really her only memories are from, her only like actual memories that she can remember are from the past, since October 7th. And she,
the bombing, but the bombing has started here again.
Really?
Yeah, the 2 explosions just went off.
Really? Okay. No. We'll see how long this lasts for. What was I saying? Oh yeah, but a few nights ago, bullets from this sniper tower in the Philadelphia corridor flew into their home, and the whole family hit the deck, except for this little girl. She just kept dancing and singing, and her mom and dad yelled. I don't know her name, but yell, come to us, come to us. What are you doing? Don't worry. And she said, don't worry, the bullets are all the way up there, because she's this little girl that hitting kind of above the refrigerator. So they had to crawl to this kid and tackle her to try and keep her safe, because she literally doesn't know anything else. But anyway, point being, no, the Israelis certainly have not honored the ceasefire, and not just from the standpoint of not shooting and bombing. But the ceasefire, it was published in the Times of Israel. It's not like it's some secret what it says. There were, I forget the exact numbers, I'll get them wrong, but I think it was 200, some hundreds of thousands of tents and mobile homes that were to be allowed into Gaza to house the population. That was not done. A few were let in, but not anywhere near, not within orders of magnitude of what was written in paper, signed by both parties, and guaranteed by the United States, Egypt, and Qatar. There was no free flow of aid into the territory. There was no free flow of commerce into the territory. You can hear airplanes now. There was no increase. There was no significant increase in medical evacuations of combatants, which is actually part of the injured combatants, which is part of the ceasefire. 50 a day with, I think, 3 companions, if I remember right, were supposed to be evacuated, and there was supposed to be an unlimited flow of medical evacuees through the Rafah border for civilians. None of that was done. None of it was done. Ehud Barak was he was a former defense minister and prime minister of Israel after Operation Pillar of Defense, I think, in 2012. Yeah, it was after that. The cabinet was kind of in a bind, because they had to stop the war because they still had this problem with the Goldstone report and stuff like that. But they hadn't achieved any of their war aims. And the cabinet was saying, no, we can't sign this ceasefire deal. It's humiliating. It basically says we lost this battle. And Barak just calmly said, look, a day after this piece of paper is signed, no one will remember what's written on it. Don't worry about it. It's always been the attitude. And that's not, I just want to say, it's not that surprising. That was our attitude towards our natives too. That's how we treated our treaties with them. It's not that surprising that the U.S. continues to do the same thing to the Israelis fighting their natives. It's I should say getting rid of their natives.
Right.
Okay, I've got to run. There's multiple ambulances coming in, multiple bombs going off. I know the ER is going to be filled, so I have to say goodbye.
Okay,
Go,
well,
Mark.
stay safe, and thank you for all that you do. So that's one part of this interview that I did with these really incredibly brave doctors. It was really incredible speaking to them. Again, that's Dr. Feroze Sidhwa, who's an American trauma surgeon. He's volunteering at Nasser Hospital right now, as we speak. And that's the other one who had to go because there was the ambulances were coming. Dr. Perlmutter, who's an orthopedic and hand surgeon, and he is right now at the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital. So this is another part of the interview, and this is where Mark comes back to join us. Well, Mark, you just joined us again. Do you have any updates about what you just witnessed?
There was several bombs that went off. 2 people died by report. They weren't brought into the hospital. Several open fractures, and there are some bowel and head injuries that are going to the OR. Well, in fact, one of the head injuries has the open fractures, and they have to be stabilized first, and we'll take care of their legs and arm fractures once the head is stabilized.
Wow.
So that'll be later on tonight.
By the way, I showed Feroze the photos that you had sent me. So this is like it looks like a mosque.
Right next to the hospital, indeed within 10 feet of where that poor fellow was burned alive in a tent. You can still see the scorch marks on the wall. Literally 10 feet from there is a mosque that was also targeted. You can see bomb holes ripping through the concrete and rebar and completely wiped out this mosque. It's part of the story of the genocide against the heritage of this beautiful culture. But more importantly, there were 66 people praying inside at the time that the bomb hit. over half of which were children, all of which died. It was a school primarily, and all of those children passed away and were incinerated.
This is a photo of like joyful looking children. I mean, it's unbelievable. They were using like peace signs.
Yeah, so these are the kids that were still praying in this mosque that didn't have a single standing wall in it. So we took a photograph together, and I asked the
there you are on the
imam
back. I see.
what they were praying for and what their prayers were, because they were saying a collective prayer. And beautifully, albeit ironically, they were praying for Israel to forgive
Holy
them. Right.
They were praying to forgive.
And
They were forgiving the Israelis and praying for them,
they
or
were
they were
they
asking
were
to be.
they were praying for the Israelis to be forgiven by Allah.
Oh my God.
Because they're not anti-Israel. They're not anti-American. They're not at all anti-Jew. They're just anti-Zionist.
Right.
They're sophisticated. They understand the difference. These young kids understood the difference. And in fact, you know, in that photograph, there's one person who's complicit with uh, the destruction of that mosque and the killing of 30 or 40 of their children friends, and that was the one wearing the hat, me. It's I, uh, metaphorically meaning an American, that's responsible for the death of their colleagues in the destruction of that mosque and the burying 1,000 or 20,000 or maybe 40,000 of other children their age under the rubble. It's I that am responsible for the destruction of 1,000 mosques and 3 of the oldest Christian churches on the face of the earth, which is an ironic thing why we have such a tremendous Christian Zionist support for what's going on when the 3 stunningly beautiful historical churches got destroyed in the same bombing, and deliberately. They were specifically targeted.